"Sir, I already told you we can't help you." The man standing at the counter, dressed in worn-out clothes, felt every pair of eyes in the store on him. He had been standing there for 10 minutes, waiting for someone to acknowledge him, but the staff ignored him. Customers walked past like he didn't exist. And now this employee, a manager, judging by his name tag, was staring at him like he was wasting his time. "I just need some help," the man said. The manager sighed. "Sir, I don't think this is the right store for you." The man's fists clenched at his sides. Because what this manager didn't know was that the man standing before them wasn't just any customer. He was the owner. And in a few minutes, every single person in this store was about to find out. James Carter had built his company from nothing. Born and raised in a small town, he had worked his way up, starting as a janitor, then moving to retail, then launching his own business. Now, he was the CEO of one of the fastest-growing retail chains in the country. But lately, something hadn't been sitting right with him. The company's reports looked fine on paper. Sales were strong, growth was steady. But then James started receiving complaints, emails, letters, stories from customers, especially black customers, who felt like they were being treated differently. At first, James didn't want to believe it. His company stood for fairness. He had made sure of that. Hadn't he? But then something happened that changed everything. A single message landed in his inbox. A black father had walked into one of James's stores with his son. They had been ignored by employees, followed by security, and eventually asked to leave for no reason. James sat in his office, staring at the email, his blood boiling. This was his company. His name was on the doors. And yet people were being treated like this. James knew there was only one way to get to the truth. He needed to see it for himself. So he came up with a plan. He was going undercover. A week later, James walked into one of his stores, but not as the CEO. He wore old jeans, a faded hoodie, and scuffed sneakers. His beard had grown out and a worn baseball cap covered most of his face. To anyone else, he looked like just another customer, and that's exactly what he wanted. James stepped inside, glancing around. The store was bright, clean, and busy. Employees bustled behind the registers, chatting with customers. But almost immediately, James noticed something. No one greeted him. Other customers walked in smiling, welcomed with a friendly "Hello, can I help you?" But James, nothing. He stood by the entrance for a moment, waiting, still nothing. So he walked deeper into the store, and that's when it started. As James browsed the aisles, he felt it, the stares. Employees glanced at him but quickly looked away. A woman working near the shoe section moved to another aisle when he got closer. A security guard standing near the registers shifted his position, watching him. James clenched his jaw. He had felt this before. As a teenager growing up in a rough neighborhood, he had been followed through stores, judged before he even spoke. But now he was the owner of this store, and still nothing had changed. James took a deep breath and walked to the front counter where a cashier stood chatting with another employee. He waited and waited. Finally, he cleared his throat. The cashier barely looked at him. "Yeah," James forced a polite smile. "Hey, I was wondering if you could help me find something." The cashier sighed, looking annoyed. "What do you need?" James held back his frustration. "I'm looking for," before he could finish, a well-dressed white customer walked up. Immediately, the cashier's entire attitude changed. "Oh, hi, ma'am. Did you find everything okay?" The woman smiled. "I did, thank you." James stared. The cashier completely ignored him and started ringing up the other customer, like he wasn't even there. His heart pounded. James took a slow breath. Maybe this was a one-time thing. Maybe it wasn't what it seemed. But then the manager walked over, and things got worse. The manager was a tall man in a dress shirt and slacks, his name tag reading Paul. He shook hands with the well-dressed woman, smiling warmly. "Thank you for shopping with us." The woman left and Paul turned, finally noticing James. But instead of greeting him, Paul's expression shifted. His polite smile vanished. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone completely different from before. James nodded. "Yeah, I was hoping to ask about a product," Paul cut him off. "Sir, are you planning on buying something?" James blinked. Yeah, that's why I'm here." Paul sighed. "I just want to make sure you're not." He stopped himself. But James already knew what he was going to say. Not causing trouble, not stealing. James felt his jaw tighten. "You know what?" he said. "Forget it." He turned to walk out, but as he reached the door, Paul said something that made him stop in his tracks. "Probably wasn't going to buy anything anyway," the manager muttered under his breath. James froze. That was it. Enough. He turned back, pulled off his cap, and stood up straight. "Actually, Paul," he said, his voice sharp and clear, "I own this store." The room went silent. Paul blinked. "What?" James took a step forward. "My name is James Carter. I'm the CEO of this company." Paul's face drained of color. Employees and customers stared in shock. And in that moment, everyone in that store knew everything was about to change. The silence in the store was deafening. Paul, the store manager, stared at James like he had just seen a ghost. Employees froze behind the counters. A few customers had even stopped mid-conversation, their eyes bouncing between James and Paul, trying to process what they just heard. The man they had just ignored, dismissed, and disrespected owned the entire company. James took another step forward, his eyes locked on Paul. "Let me repeat myself," James said, his voice calm but firm. "I'm James Carter. I built this company from the ground up. And right now, I'm standing in one of my own stores, being treated like I don't belong here." Paul swallowed hard, his face now a shade of pale that wasn't far from panic. "Mr. Carter, James held up a hand. "No excuses, I want to hear something else first." Paul hesitated. "I want you to say exactly what you just mumbled under your breath." Paul's eyes darted around the room. He knew he was trapped. He had said something he never thought would come back to haunt him. But James wasn't letting it slide, not this time. "Say it," James repeated. Paul cleared his throat. I didn't mean." "Say it." Paul let out a shaky breath. "I said you probably weren't going to buy anything anyway." James let the words hang in the air. Every single person in that store now understood exactly what had just happened. This wasn't just bad customer service. This was discrimination. And Paul had been caught red-handed. James exhaled slowly, keeping his temper in check. "So let me get this straight," he said. "Because of the way I looked, you assumed I wasn't here to shop." Paul opened his mouth, then closed it. He had no defense. James turned his gaze to the employees at the registers. "And the rest of you?" he asked. "Did anyone think to greet me, ask if I needed help?" The employees looked at the floor. Not a single one spoke. James nodded, his suspicion confirmed. "That's what I thought." James took a slow breath, then turned back to Paul. "How long have you worked here?" Paul straightened his posture. 6 years, sir." 6 years, James repeated. "And in all that time, have you ever stopped to think about how you treat people?" Paul's jaw tightened. "Mr. Carter, I didn't mean anything by it." You were just assuming," James interrupted, "based on nothing but appearances. And now you're standing here trying to talk your way out of it instead of taking responsibility." Paul swallowed hard. James wasn't finished. "Tell me something," James said. "If I wasn't the CEO, if I was just some guy off the street, how would this have ended?" Paul hesitated. James already knew the answer. "Would I have been followed around the store?" Paul looked at the floor. "Would security have been called?" No response. "Would I have been kicked out?" The silence was all the answer James needed. He sighed and rubbed his temples. "Here's the thing, Paul," he said. "I built this company to serve everyone, not just people who look like they have money. Not just people you personally feel comfortable helping. Everyone." Paul's face burned red. James continued. "And yet today, I saw exactly how you and your team treat people who don't fit your ideal customer." James shook his head. That's not just bad service, that's discrimination. And I won't tolerate it. Paul's panic deepened. Sir, please, I didn't mean to offend anyone. James held up a hand. I don't want an apology, I want change. Paul froze. Which is why, effective immediately, you're no longer the manager of this store. The words hit like a brick wall. Paul's face drained of color. Wait, what? James didn't repeat himself. Paul was done here. As Paul stood there, stunned into silence, James turned to the employees at the registers. Let me be clear, he said. The culture in this store changes today. No more ignoring customers based on how they look. No more deciding who gets good service and who doesn't. The employees nodded quickly, still in shock. James let his words settle, then took a deep breath. I'm not here to fire everyone, but I am here to fix this. He turned toward a young woman who had been stocking shelves nearby. What's your name? He asked. The woman hesitated. Jasmine, sir. Jasmine, how long have you worked here? 2 years. Do you like it? Jasmine hesitated, then she sighed. Honestly, not really. James nodded. He appreciated the honesty. Why not? Jasmine bit her lip. Because people like Paul run the place, and the rest of us have to just go along with it. James already knew that was the case. He turned back to the rest of the staff. I want to fix that too, he said. And I'm going to start by hiring a new store manager, one who actually understands what customer service should look like. Then he looked back at Jasmine. Someone like you. Jasmine's eyes widened. Me. James smiled. I've been watching how you handle customers. You treat everyone with respect. That's the kind of leadership we need. Jasmine looked like she was about to faint. But I've never been a manager before, she said. James shrugged. Neither had I before I became one. Jasmine was speechless. Paul, on the other hand, still standing there, mouth open in shock. James turned to him one last time. Maybe this will be a lesson for you, James said. Because no matter how someone looks when they walk into this store, you never know who you're talking to. And with that, James walked out, leaving behind a store that would never be the same again. Jasmine sat in the break room, staring at the cup of coffee in front of her, hands trembling. She was still in shock. 5 hours ago, she was a regular employee, stocking shelves, ignored like everyone else. Now she was the new manager of the store, and she had no idea what to do next. She had spent the rest of the shift trying to process what had happened. James Carter, the CEO of the company, had not only exposed Paul but had personally chosen her to replace him. Jasmine could still see Paul's stunned expression as James made the announcement. She could still hear the whispers from her coworkers. Did that really just happen? He just fired Paul on the spot, and now Jasmine's in charge. Everything had changed in an instant. And while part of her was grateful for the opportunity, another part of her was terrified. She had never been in a leadership position before. What if she failed? What if the employees didn't respect her? What if she wasn't strong enough for this? Jasmine let out a shaky breath, running a hand through her hair. Then she heard the break room door open. She looked up. James Carter was standing in the doorway. Mind if I sit? He asked. Jasmine straightened immediately. Of course. James chuckled and pulled out a chair. You okay? He asked. Jasmine hesitated before nodding. Just a lot to take in, she admitted. James nodded. I get it. Jasmine let out a small laugh. Do you? James smirked. You'd be surprised. He leaned back in his chair, studying her. So tell me. What's going through your head? Jasmine sighed. Honestly, I don't know if I'm ready for this. James nodded slowly. Why not? Jasmine hesitated. Because I don't know how to be a leader. Paul, he was awful, yeah, but he knew how to run a store. He knew how to manage people. I don't. James raised an eyebrow. Really? Because I think you do. Jasmine frowned. What do you mean? James leaned forward. Jasmine, I didn't just pick you at random. I've been watching how you handle things. You respect the employees. You help customers. You don't ignore people. He gestured toward the door. That alone makes you a better leader than Paul ever was. Jasmine swallowed hard. But what if I mess up? James smiled. Then you learn that's what leadership is. Jasmine sat back thinking. James was right. Paul had been loud, controlling, and intimidating, but that didn't mean he was a good leader. A real leader wasn't about power. It was about respect. Jasmine took a deep breath and made a decision. Okay, she said, I'm in. James grinned. I knew you would be. The next morning, Jasmine walked into the store feeling different. For the first time, she wasn't just another employee. She was in charge, but there was a lot to fix. She could feel the tension from the moment she stepped inside. Employees were watching her closely, whispering to each other. They weren't sure what to expect, and honestly, neither was she. But Jasmine knew one thing: the way this store operated had to change. So she called for a meeting. The break room was packed. Employees filled every seat, some standing near the walls. For years, meetings in this store had been one-sided. Paul would stand at the front barking orders. No one spoke. No one questioned him. Today was going to be different. Jasmine took a deep breath and stepped forward. I know things have been rough around here, she started. Silence. Employees watched her cautiously, waiting. And I know some of you are probably wondering if anything is really going to change. More silence. Then someone in the back muttered, "Yeah, we've heard this before." Jasmine nodded. I get it, but I'm not here to be another Paul. That got their attention. I want to run this store the right way. I want to hear from you. I want to know what's working and what's not. A few employees exchanged glances. Jasmine took a deep breath. So let's start with the basics. What's the biggest problem in this store? At first, no one spoke. Then a cashier named Lewis hesitated before raising his hand. Schedules, he said. Paul used to change them last minute and we'd have no idea when we were working until the night before. Jasmine nodded. That's not okay. We'll fix that. Then another hand went up. Breaks, said a woman from the stockroom. We barely get them. And if we do, we're rushed back to work. Jasmine's stomach tightened. That's going to change too, she promised. Then a third voice spoke. We don't feel respected. Jasmine turned toward the voice. It was Malik, a longtime employee. Paul treated us like we were disposable, Malik continued. Like we didn't matter. If we messed up even a little, he'd humiliate us in front of customers. A few others nodded in agreement. Jasmine felt her hands clench into fists. That stops now, she said firmly. She scanned the room. I can't change what happened before, but I can promise you this. Under my management, you will be treated with respect. Your time will be valued. And if you ever have a problem, you can come to me. Silence, then one clap, then another. And then the entire room was applauding. Jasmine let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. They believed her, and now it was time to prove herself. That night Jasmine sat in the office, the same office Paul had once occupied, but now it was Paul's office. It was hers. She took a deep breath, looking at the schedule she was already working to fix. There was still a lot to do. But for the first time, Jasmine wasn't afraid. She wasn't just an employee anymore. She was a leader, and she was ready. Jasmine sat behind the manager's desk, staring at the stack of paperwork in front of her. It still didn't feel real. She was the boss now. For years, she had been the one taking orders, following schedules, and keeping her head down. Now people were looking to her for direction. And if today was any indication, she had a lot of work to do. Her first challenge came almost immediately. That morning, a cashier named Lewis knocked on her office door. Hey, Jasmine, got a second? She nodded. Of course, what's up? Lewis hesitated before stepping inside. I just wanted to ask about the new schedule. Are we really getting it a week in advance now? Jasmine smiled. Yup, no more last-minute changes. Lewis exhaled in relief. Man, you don't know how much that helps. Paul used to switch our shifts the night before, and I could never plan anything. Jasmine nodded. That's not fair to you. If we expect employees to be reliable, management has to be reliable too. Lewis grinned. Well, I appreciate it. People are already talking about how different things feel around here. Jasmine's chest warmed. Change was happening, but she knew not everyone was happy about it, and she was about to find out just how much resistance she was up against. An hour later, Jasmine was reviewing inventory reports when a sharp knock sounded at her door. Before she could respond, a woman stormed in. It was Monica, the store's assistant manager, and she did not look pleased. "We need to talk." Jasmine frowned. "Okay, what's on your mind?" Monica crossed her arms. "I've been here for 6 years. 6, and now I'm supposed to answer to you." Jasmine instantly understood. Monica had been Paul's right hand. She had been second in command for years, probably expecting to be next in line for the manager role. Instead, James Carter had chosen Jasmine. "I get that this is a big change," Jasmine said carefully. Monica scoffed. "Big change? You've been here 2 years, Jasmine. I've been running this place for longer than that." Jasmine kept her voice level. "Then you know better than anyone that this store needed to change." Monica folded her arms. "And you think you're the one to do it?" Jasmine didn't hesitate. "Yes," Monica narrowed her eyes. "So what, you're just gonna undo everything Paul built?" Jasmine let out a slow breath. "Monica, what Paul built wasn't leadership, it was fear. He treated employees like they were disposable. That's not how this store should run." Monica clenched her jaw. "Paul got results. No, he got compliance. There's a difference." Monica's nostrils flared. Jasmine leaned forward. "Look, I know you were close with Paul, and I'm not here to push you out. I want you on this team, but that means things have to change." Monica stared at her. For a moment, Jasmine thought she might argue again. But then Monica exhaled sharply and shook her head. "Fine, we'll see how long this lasts." Then she turned and walked out. Jasmine watched her go, feeling the weight of leadership settle on her shoulders. Not everyone was going to be on board with change, but that wasn't going to stop her. That afternoon, Jasmine walked the store floor, checking in with employees. For the first time in years, people weren't just going through the motions. They were smiling, talking, relaxed. It was small progress, but it was progress. Then something caught her attention. Near the entrance, a young black man stood looking at a display of electronics. Jasmine saw Monica and another employee watching him from the counter. She heard Monica murmur something. The other employee nodded. Jasmine's stomach tightened. She knew exactly what was happening. Without hesitation, she walked over. "Hey there," she greeted the customer with a smile. "Need any help?" The man looked up, surprised. "Oh, yeah, actually. I was wondering if you guys have these headphones in stock." Jasmine turned to Monica. "Can you check inventory?" Monica's lips pressed into a thin line, but after a second, she nodded and walked toward the register. Jasmine turned back to the customer. "Sorry about that. What's your name?" "Derek." "Nice to meet you, Derek. First time shopping here." Derek chuckled. "Nah, but let's just say I don't always get great service." Jasmine's jaw tightened. "Well, that's changing." Derek raised an eyebrow. "Oh yeah," Jasmine nodded. "Yeah, this store belongs to everyone. No exceptions." A slow smile spread across Derek's face. "Good to know." A few minutes later, Monica returned with the headphones. "We have them," she said shortly. Jasmine gestured toward Derek. "Then let's get him checked out." Monica hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then, finally, she nodded. Jasmine watched as Derek completed his purchase, then gave her a nod of appreciation as he walked out the door. She turned back to Monica. "That's how we do things now," she said. Monica didn't respond, but she didn't argue either. And for Jasmine, that was a step in the right direction. That night, Jasmine sat in her office, exhausted but proud. She had handled her first confrontation as manager. She had made sure a customer was treated fairly. And little by little, she was changing the culture of the store. Her phone buzzed. It was an email from James Carter. Subject: Great work today. Jasmine opened it. Jasmine, I heard about how you handled things today. Keep it up. The best leaders don't just fix problems, they change systems. And that's exactly what you're doing. A warm feeling spread through Jasmine's chest. She set down her phone and leaned back in her chair. She wasn't just running a store anymore. She was building something better, and she was just getting started. Jasmine arrived at the store early, long before the first customers would walk through the doors. She needed time to think. It had been a whirlwind of a week since she had stepped into the manager position. The transition wasn't easy. Some employees welcomed the change, others resisted it. Monica, in particular, still wasn't on board. Jasmine knew she couldn't change everything overnight, but that didn't mean she wasn't going to try. She sat at her desk, flipping through reports. Sales were steady, customer complaints were down, and employee morale, while not perfect, was improving. Still, something felt off, and she couldn't shake the feeling that today was going to be a test. She just didn't know how big of one. By mid-morning, the store was buzzing with activity. Customers walked the aisles, employees stocked shelves, and cashiers rang up purchases. Jasmine stood near the front, observing. Then the doors opened. A man walked in. Expensive suit, polished shoes, cold, calculating eyes. Jasmine didn't recognize him, but Monica did. She went rigid behind the counter. Jasmine noticed immediately. "Who is that?" she asked. Monica swallowed hard. "Corporate." Jasmine's stomach tightened. She had been expecting pushback from upper management. She just didn't think it would come this soon. The man spotted them and walked straight over. "You must be Jasmine," he said smoothly. Jasmine extended a hand. "And you are?" "Richard Crane, Regional Director." Jasmine had heard of him, corporate's enforcer. The guy who showed up when headquarters didn't like how things were being run. Jasmine's pulse quickened, but she kept her face neutral. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Crane. What brings you in today?" Crane smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I'm here because we've been hearing interesting things about this location." Jasmine raised an eyebrow. "Interesting how?" Crane glanced around the store, his expression unreadable. "Let's talk in your office." Jasmine's stomach churned, but she nodded. "Right this way." Jasmine sat behind her desk while Crane settled into the chair across from her. He didn't waste time. "Corporate has concerns about the changes you're making." Jasmine folded her hands. "Which changes specifically?" Crane studied her as if sizing her up. "Let's start with payroll. We noticed some increases." Jasmine nodded. "Yes, I made adjustments to ensure employees are paid fairly. Many had been working here for years with no raises." Crane wasn't impressed. "Jasmine, there's a reason payroll was structured the way it was before." Jasmine's jaw tightened. "Yeah." "And that reason was to squeeze more work out of employees for the lowest possible wage." Crane's eyes narrowed slightly. "That's one way to look at it," he said. "Another way is to say that it kept stores profitable." Jasmine exhaled slowly, keeping her temper in check. "This store is still profitable," she said, "and now employees actually want to work here." Crane waved a hand dismissively. "Let's move on. I also saw that you've changed scheduling policies." "That's right," Jasmine said. "Employees now get their schedules a week in advance, with no last-minute changes unless absolutely necessary." Crane wasn't impressed. "That limits flexibility," he said. "Managers need to be able to make quick adjustments." Jasmine held her ground. "People have lives outside of work. They deserve to plan around their jobs, not be at the mercy of last-minute decisions." Crane leaned back, studying her again. "You really think all these changes are worth it?" Jasmine met his gaze. "I know they are." For the first time, Crane's expression shifted. "You remind me of James," he muttered. Jasmine straightened. "Mr. Carter?" Crane smirked. "Yeah, always pushing for change, always challenging the way things were done." Jasmine wasn't sure if that was a compliment or a warning. "And where do you stand on that?" she asked. Crane chuckled. I stand wherever corporate tells me to stand. Jasmine clenched her fists under the desk. Well, James Carter owns this company, she said, and he supports what I'm doing. Crane nodded slowly. He does for now, but companies don't run on emotions, Jasmine, they run on numbers. If the numbers don't hold up, support can disappear fast. Jasmine knew what he was saying. If profits dropped, she'd be gone. This wasn't just about doing the right thing. She had to prove that doing the right thing was good business. Jasmine took a deep breath. Then I'll make sure the numbers speak for themselves. Crane smirked. I'll be watching. Then just like that, he stood up, adjusted his tie, and walked out. Jasmine exhaled sharply. She had survived the first round. But the real fight was just beginning. That afternoon, Monica stepped into Jasmine's office. That looked intense, she said. Jasmine let out a small laugh. That's one way to put it. Monica hesitated. Then she sighed. Look, I may not have agreed with all the changes you're making, but after today, I see what you're up against. Jasmine raised an eyebrow, and Monica took a deep breath. And maybe you're the right person for this job after all. Jasmine was shocked. This was the closest thing to support Monica had ever given her. I appreciate that, Jasmine said. Monica nodded. You're still gonna have to prove yourself, she added. Jasmine smirked. Wouldn't have it any other way. Monica chuckled and left the office. For the first time, Jasmine felt like she had a real shot at turning this store around. She wasn't just fighting against the past. She was building the future. And she wasn't going to let anyone, not even corporate, stop her. Jasmine sat at her desk long after the store had closed, staring at the sales reports spread out in front of her. Crane's warning echoed in her mind. Companies don't run on emotions. They run on numbers. If the numbers don't hold up, support can disappear fast. She knew what that meant. If profits dropped, corporate would find a reason to get rid of her, and if she was gone, everything she fought for would be undone. The higher wages, the fair schedules, the culture of respect she was trying to build, it would all disappear. Jasmine clenched her jaw, not on her watch. She had one option: make sure the store performed better than ever. That was the only way to win. She exhaled, took out a notepad, and started writing. If they wanted results, she was going to give them results. The next morning, Jasmine gathered the employees for a meeting before the store opened. People were still waking up, sipping coffee, rubbing their eyes, but Jasmine had their full attention. All right, guys, she started. I won't sugarcoat it. Corporate is watching us closely. They want to see if these changes actually help the store or if we're just wasting money. Murmurs spread through the room. Lewis frowned. So, what happens if they don't like what they see? Jasmine didn't hesitate. Then everything we're building here could be reversed. The energy in the room shifted. Employees exchanged worried glances. They had started to trust the new system, trust that their hard work was finally being recognized. The last thing they wanted was to go back to the way things were. Jasmine took a breath. That's why we need to make sure this store performs better than ever. We need to prove that treating employees well isn't just nice, it's good for business. People started nodding. She had their attention. Now she needed to get them on board. Jasmine started with customer experience. If they wanted stronger numbers, they needed to turn casual shoppers into loyal customers. She pulled Monica aside later that afternoon. We need to step up our service game, Jasmine said. Monica raised an eyebrow. You saying we aren't already? Jasmine smirked. I'm saying we can do better. Monica folded her arms. All right, what's your plan? Jasmine had already thought about that. We focus on the small things, she said. Greeting every customer, offering to help, going the extra mile. We make this store the best shopping experience in the district. Monica let out a small chuckle. You really think being nice is going to boost sales? Jasmine nodded. People spend more money when they feel valued, it's a fact. Monica sighed, then shrugged. All right, boss. Let's see if you're right. That week, the employees stepped up their game. From the moment customers walked in, they were greeted warmly. Employees actually helped people instead of just pointing them in the right direction. And when a woman couldn't find the right size of a jacket she wanted, Lewis personally called another location and had it shipped to her home for free. She left grinning from ear to ear. By the end of the week, Jasmine pulled the numbers. And the results? Customer satisfaction was at an all-time high. The reviews were glowing. And best of all, sales were going up. But that wasn't the only area she needed to focus on. Jasmine knew that to really outperform expectations, they needed to increase efficiency. She spent her next few days in the stockroom, figuring out where time and resources were being wasted. And what she found? A complete mess. Inventory was disorganized. Employees spent too much time tracking down missing items. Deliveries were frequently delayed because of poor planning. Jasmine rolled up her sleeves. If no one had fixed this before, she was going to fix it now. She worked with the stockroom team, reorganizing everything from the ground up. She streamlined the system so that employees could find items faster, restock shelves quicker, and track shipments more accurately. By the end of the second week, their efficiency had improved by over 30%. Things were moving faster, customers were happier, and profits were climbing. But Jasmine wasn't done yet. She had one last move to make. At the end of the week, she called a store-wide meeting. "All right, guys," she said, standing in front of the team. "We've been killing it. Sales are up, customer reviews are better than ever, and corporate, they're watching all of it." People smiled proudly. They had worked hard, and now they were seeing the results. Jasmine let that moment settle before continuing. "But there's one last thing I want to do." The room quieted. "I want to start an employee incentive program." People exchanged curious glances. "Here, how it works," Jasmine continued. "Each month we recognize the top-performing employees, those who go above and beyond for customers, for their coworkers, for the store. And those employees," she grinned, "they get bonuses." The room lit up. A bonus system, recognition for hard work. This was unheard of. Lewis raised a hand. "Wait, real bonuses like money?" Jasmine laughed. "Yes, Lewis, real money." Excitement rippled through the team. For years they had worked under managers who never appreciated them. Now they finally had a reason to care. Jasmine clapped her hands together. "This only works if we keep up the momentum. But if we do, we're going to make this store the best one in the entire company." The employees cheered. For the first time since she stepped into this role, Jasmine could feel the energy shifting. This wasn't just about proving herself anymore. This was about all of them. And they were ready to win. That night, Jasmine sat in her office staring at the newest sales reports. The numbers were clear. Sales were way up. Employee satisfaction higher than ever. She had done it. She had turned the store around. And now, she was ready for whatever corporate threw at her next. Because this time, she had proof that treating people right wasn't just good ethics, it was good business, and no one could argue with that. Jasmine sat in her office waiting. The numbers were in. Sales were up 20%. Customer satisfaction had doubled. Employee turnover, the lowest it had been in years. Jasmine had done everything corporate asked for and more. Now she just needed to hear it from them. Her laptop screen blinked. Incoming video call, James Carter. Jasmine exhaled and clicked accept. James appeared on the screen, smiling. "Jasmine, how's my favorite store manager?" Jasmine chuckled, hopefully still employed. James smirked. "You're not just employed, Jasmine, you're making history." She froze. "What do you mean?" James leaned forward. "Corporate just finished reviewing your store's performance. Not only did you prove that employee investment works, you outperformed every other location in the district." Jasmine's heart pounded. "Wait, seriously?" James nodded. Crane wasn't happy about it, but even he couldn't argue with the results. "You won, Jasmine." Jasmine let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. She had been fighting an uphill battle for weeks, and now she had won. James grinned. I knew you could do it. And because of your success, we're expanding your policies to every store in the company. Jasmine blinked. All of them. Every single one. A warm feeling spread through her chest. This wasn't just about her store anymore. This was about thousands of employees getting the respect they deserved. She had changed everything. James smiled. So the question is, what's next for you? Jasmine frowned. What do you mean? James leaned back. Jasmine, you've proven you can run a store. Now I want to see what you can do at the next level. Jasmine's stomach flipped. You're offering me a promotion. James smirked. You deserve it. I want you to train new managers, oversee company-wide employee initiatives, and make sure these policies succeed everywhere. Jasmine was stunned. She had gone from just another worker being ignored to leading one store to changing the entire company. So, what do you say? James asked. Jasmine didn't hesitate. I'm in. 2 weeks later, Jasmine stood at the front of a packed conference room. In front of her sat managers from stores across the country. She took a deep breath and began. I know what it's like to feel invisible. The room fell silent. I know what it's like to work hard and feel like no one notices, to wonder if things will ever change. She looked around. Some of these managers had struggled under the same broken system. But now they had the power to fix it. Well, things are changing, and it starts with us. She clicked the first slide on the projector. New employee standards, fair wages, consistent schedules, respect for every worker. This isn't just a policy change. It's a culture change. If we want our stores to succeed, we have to take care of the people running them. She saw heads nodding. People were listening. Jasmine smiled. So let's get to work. A month later, Jasmine stood in the very store where it all began. But this time, she was visiting as a corporate leader. The moment she walked through the doors, she could feel the difference. Employees were engaged. Customers were happy. Even Monica, who had once doubted her, greeted her with a smirk and a nod. Gotta admit, Monica said, crossing her arms, you pulled it off. Jasmine grinned. Told you I would. Monica chuckled. Yeah, don't let it go to your head. Jasmine glanced around. Everything felt right. She had spent her whole life waiting for someone to notice her, to give her a chance. Now she was the one giving others that chance, and she wasn't stopping anytime soon. Later that night, Jasmine sat in her new office at corporate headquarters, looking out at the city skyline. She thought about everything that had led her here. Getting overlooked, getting fired, getting a second chance, fighting to prove herself. She had earned this. Her phone buzzed, a text from James Carter. Proud of you, let's change the world. Jasmine smiled. She texted back. Already started. And with that, she closed her laptop, took a deep breath, and walked into her future. Because this was just the beginning.